Every single night, for nearly 30 years, money disappeared from Las Vegas. Not stolen, not missing, not misplaced. Just gone. Hundreds of millions of dollars that the IRS never saw, that the casinos never reported, that the government knew existed but could never, for decades, prove. It moved in paper bags, in suitcases, in the trunks of ordinary cars driven by ordinary-looking men through the Nevada desert in the middle of the night. And the people responsible weren't hiding in shadows. They were standing on the casino floor. They were behind the front desk. They were sitting in the executive offices of some of the most famous buildings in America. How did they do it? How did they get away with it for 30 years? And why did the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world take decades to stop them? To understand how the mob controlled Las Vegas, you have to understand what Las Vegas was before the mob arrived. Nothing. Desert. Heat. A railroad stop. A place people passed through on the way to somewhere that actually mattered. Then, in 1931, Nevada legalized gambling, and the money started moving. The first serious organized crime figure to see what Las Vegas could become was Benjamin Siegel, a New York mobster, childhood friend of Meyer Lansky, the man some historians consider the most financially sophisticated criminal mind in American history. Siegel looked at that Nevada desert and saw something nobody else could see yet. A machine, a legal machine that took money from millions of willing participants and concentrated it in a single room. He built the Flamingo Hotel in 1946, went massively over budget, skimmed from his own construction funds, made powerful enemies, and 6 months after the Flamingo opened, on a June night in 1947, he was shot 4 times through the window of his girlfriend's home in Beverly Hills. Nobody was ever charged. But here is what Siegel's death actually did. It sent a message to every organized crime family in America simultaneously. Las Vegas is open. And within a decade, they all came. By the 1950s, Las Vegas had become what Meyer Lansky always said it would be. A place where the house always wins. And the house was owned by men whose names never appeared on any official document. The Chicago Outfit, the Kansas City Mob, Milwaukee, Cleveland, New York. Las Vegas was declared an open city, meaning no single family owned it exclusively. Every major crime family in America had a piece, representatives, hidden interests. Investments buried so deep inside layers of shell companies and frontmen that government investigators spent years just trying to map the structure. And here is what made Las Vegas different from every other criminal enterprise in American history. It was legal. The gambling was legal. The hotels were legal. The liquor licenses were legal. The entertainment was legal. Everything that happened on the surface was completely legitimate. That was the genius of it. The mob didn't need to operate in the shadows, they just needed to control what happened in one room. Picture this. It is 2 a.m. The casino floor is still alive. Slot machines singing, chips clicking, cocktail waitresses moving through clouds of cigarette smoke. But in a locked room in the back of the building, something else is happening. Every locked drop box from every slot machine on the floor has been collected. Every cash drawer from every table game has been pulled. Security has wheeled it all into a single windowless room where only 3 or 4 people are ever allowed at any given time. This is the count room, the vault, the beating heart of the entire operation. And in a legitimate casino, what happens next is straightforward. The money gets counted, the total gets recorded, that number goes to the accounting department, taxes get paid, everything is documented. But in a mob-controlled casino? Before the count begins, a man walks in. He has complete access to this room. Nobody stops him. Nobody acknowledges him. He moves to the pile of cash, removes a specific amount, places it in a bag, and walks out. That money was never counted. It never entered the books. For all practical purposes, it never existed. The skimmed cash was removed from casino count rooms by couriers with full access to those sensitive areas. These men weren't challenged or even acknowledged by other employees as they entered, made their withdrawals, and departed. The currency they took was never logged in, and there was no official record of it. For all practical purposes, it was as though the money never existed. That was the skim. Not dramatic, not violent, not complicated, just a man, a bag, and a room where the rules of accounting did not apply. If you want to understand how the skim worked at its most sophisticated, you look at one building, the Stardust Casino, Las Vegas Strip. 1968, on paper, the Stardust was owned by a clean-cut San Diego businessman named Alan Glick. Legitimate, licensed, approved by the Nevada Gaming Control Board. He ran a company called Argent Corporation that controlled 4 casinos, the Stardust, the Fremont, the Hacienda, and the Marina. But Alan Glick was a frontman, a face. a name on a document so that the real owners never had to appear anywhere near a gaming license application. The real owner was the Chicago outfit, and the man they installed to actually run the operation was Frank Rosenthal, known as Lefty, a sports handicapper and odds genius from Chicago with a criminal background that made him ineligible for a gaming license. So he ran 4 of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas under the title of food and beverage director, then entertainment director, then sports consultant. He ran it all. He just couldn't have his name on the door. Rosenthal answered directly to Chicago. And every month, cash moved out of the Stardust's count room in quantities that would make the IRS physically ill, if the IRS had ever been allowed to see them. The Nevada Gaming Control Board later determined that employees of Argent's casinos quietly skimmed about $7 million from 1974 to 1976 from slot machines on behalf of Milwaukee, Chicago, Kansas City, and Cleveland crime families with hidden interests in the properties. $7 million in 2 years from slot machine coins alone, and that was just what investigators could prove. Money this large requires protection. In 1971, Chicago sent a man to Las Vegas to make sure that protection was absolute. His name was Anthony Spilotro, known on the street as Tony the Ant, a name earned not through physical size, he was a small man, but through a particular kind of violence that even hardened mob figures found disturbing. Spilotro's job was simple in theory. Watch the skim, keep Rosenthal in line, handle any street problems that emerged. Make sure nobody, rival, regulator, or civilian disrupted the flow of money from Las Vegas to Chicago. In practice, his presence transformed Las Vegas. For years, there was an understanding of sorts about keeping violence out of the city. But things slowly began to change while Spilotro and Rosenthal were here. Car bombings, restaurant bombings, men who asked the wrong questions disappeared without explanation. Spilotro ran his street operation out of a gift shop at Circus Circus. A jewelry store called the Gold Rush became a front for fencing stolen goods. He formed a burglary crew so brazen they became known as the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang, named for their method of drilling directly through the exterior walls of buildings they robbed. He was operating in complete daylight. Everybody knew who he was, what he did, who he answered to. And for years, nobody could touch him. Here is what most people miss about the Las Vegas skim. It wasn't one family. It wasn't one operation. It was a coordinated system involving organized crime families from across the entire country, each with a hidden ownership stake, each receiving a cut, each carefully managed to ensure nobody took more than their agreed share. Chicago, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Cleveland. Carl DeLuna of Kansas City, an efficient overseer, was assigned to monitor the Vegas action and make sure each family received its fair share of the proceeds. In that role, he was one of the most trusted men in American organized crime. Think about what that actually means. Multiple crime families, organizations that competed, feuded, and occasionally killed each other over territory, sitting down and agreeing to share a single revenue stream, keeping records, maintaining proportional distributions, sending couriers through the desert with cash allocations that had been calculated with the precision of a corporate dividend. The American Mafia ran Las Vegas like a publicly traded company, except the shareholders were crime bosses, the dividends were untaxed, and the annual report was kept in code in the back of a Kansas City notebook. Building casinos costs money. Legitimate banks in the 1950s and 60s would not lend to people with mob connections, which created a problem. How do you fund a multi-million-dollar resort construction project when every legitimate financial institution in the country considers you a criminal? You find a different bank. The Teamsters Union Central States Pension Fund, Jimmy Hoffa's fund, the retirement savings of hundreds of thousands of American truck drivers, sitting in an account controlled by a man with deep ties to organized crime. And through that fund, the mob essentially had access to an unlimited construction loan with almost no oversight. An organized crime family could put together $15 million and open a strip casino, or borrow $50 million from the Teamsters Pension Fund to build a megasort. Caesar's Palace, built partly with Teamsters money. The Stardust, the Fremont. Property after property on the Las Vegas Strip was financed through a pension fund that was supposed to protect working Americans' retirement savings. The mob didn't just skim the casinos. They used ordinary workers' futures to build the casinos they were going to skim. For years, the FBI knew. They knew about the skim, they knew about the hidden ownership, they knew about the courier routes through the Nevada desert. They had documents, they had informants, they had recorded conversations. What they didn't have, for a long time, was evidence obtained legally. In 1963, the FBI handed the Justice Department a 2-volume document called the Skimming Report. It detailed exactly how pre-tax casino profits were being routed to organized crime families across the country. Nobody was prosecuted, because the FBI had obtained the information by illegally bugging the casino count rooms. The information was accurate, the evidence was useless, so they started over. In 1977, the FBI launched Operation Strawman, a full-scale legal investigation into mob infiltration of the Las Vegas Strip. This time, they did it properly. Legal wiretaps, undercover operations, surveillance. One of the major breakthroughs came from surveillance at the Admiral Theater, a strip club in Chicago. The feds bugged the back room, a place where Chicago outfit bosses held court. The tapes captured Mafia captains openly discussing their hidden ownership in Vegas casinos and the exact mechanisms of the skim. The mob bosses were recorded, in their own voices, describing their own crimes. The walls were closing. By the early 1980s, everything was unraveling simultaneously. Spilatro's burglary crew had been broken up. Key members were arrested. One of his closest associates, a childhood friend named Frank Collada, decided that cooperating with the FBI was preferable to whatever Spilatro had planned for him. Collada talked. The Stardust lost its gaming license in 1983. The mob's access to the casino that had been the center of their empire for a decade was gone. Federal prosecutors began working through the chain. Indictment after indictment. Casino managers, mob lieutenants, family bosses. The saga ended in 1986 with the convictions and federal prison terms for more than a dozen top U.S. mobsters, including Milwaukee boss Frank Balistrieri, Chicago outfit leaders Joseph Iuppa and Jackie Cerrone, Carl DeLuna of Kansas City, and Milton Rockman of Cleveland. The men who had run the most sophisticated criminal financial operation in American history were going to prison. And Tony Spilatro? In June 1986, he and his brother Michael were beaten to death and buried in an Indiana cornfield. The Chicago outfit had decided they were too much of a liability, too visible, too reckless, too expensive to keep alive. Their bodies were found by a farmer. The men who ordered the killing were eventually convicted in Chicago in 2007. 21 years later. By the late 1980s, it was over. The casinos that had been run by men with no names on any document were purchased by corporations. Hilton, Mirage Resorts, Caesars. The Nevada Gaming Control Board, once easily navigated, had been completely reformed. Technology arrived. Every slot machine connected to a network. Every dollar tracked in real time. Every discrepancy flagged instantly. The Italian Mafia's presence in Las Vegas ended in the mid-1980s. The Stardust itself, the crown jewel of the entire operation, was imploded in 2007, demolished, replaced by a resort called Resorts World. Today, you can stand on that spot and there is no physical evidence that anything ever happened there. But here is what the Las Vegas skim actually was. It wasn't a crime story, it was a system story. A group of men looked at a legal industry, gambling, and identified a single point in the process where money existed but hadn't yet been counted, where it was real but not yet recorded. And they built an entire invisible empire around that gap. 30 years, multiple cities, hundreds of people, billions of dollars, all of it balanced on the 30 seconds between a Dropbox being opened and a number being written down. The mob didn't beat Las Vegas. They understood it better than anyone else, and for 30 years, the house that always wins was their house. Understand the system, see the consequence.